Let's see, we've got several people joining. We can go ahead and into the next slide, Ian. I'll just kick us off here. We're just really excited to have you all here to introduce RAD Studio 12 from Embarcadero and IDE. As you may know, Embarcadero is owned and part of the IDE Corp group of companies. As you can see on this list here, multiple companies, not just DevOps companies, but testing tools, really anything you would need in your suite of tools in your arsenal, IDE does offer. So we're excited today to highlight and focus on one of our companies, Embarcadero, and the great work that's been done on RAD Studio 12. Go ahead, Ian. So what is RAD Studio? Most of you, I'm sure, are familiar, and if you're not, I'll give you a quick overview. RAD Studio is the ultimate IDE for building multi-platform, high-performant native applications in modern Object Pascal and extended C++ with tons of powerful tools around design and tool chains. Well, let's get into what makes RAD Studio great. And that starts primarily with, if we go to the next slide, there we go. That starts mainly with you and a strong community. That's really the central focus of RAD Studio, and having a really strong developer community, tech partners, MVPs, trainers. The gentleman you see at the top of the screen here, behind the scenes working on and delivering on your expectations for strong productivity, building faster native apps, database access, and the visual designers that you've come to know and love. And this release in RAD Studio 12 really expands on a lot of that. So let's take a look here at the presenters that we have for us today, and I'll just give a quick intro here as we move forward. You'll see us here on the screen, and then we'll be behind the scenes throughout the webinar. Nuno Castro focusing on C++, along with David Millington working on our C++ side and the IDE tooling itself. Marco Cantu focused primarily on the Delphi side, but really driving RAD Studio as a whole forward. And then some new faces that you may not recognize, Ian Barker, who has done a great job working with, understanding our community, and then communicating that internally to us in terms of what you're asking for so that we deliver. And then Stephen Ball supporting our teams internally, working with you to deliver in the best way possible RAD Studio for you and your customers, and focusing as well on Interbase. And myself, Kyle, GM, really just watching these guys work and understanding and getting to know you guys and the community. But really excited to be here. I think we've got a great lineup for you today, and we'll go ahead and shift into the next slide, which I think we've just got a couple teaser slides for you here as we get into the content. So RAD Studio 12 Athens, really excited about this release. Big things to call out that this includes. This is an update to C++ Builder, so C++ Builder 12 Athens, now with Visual Assist for C++ Builder, and then Delphi 12 Athens. You'll see our new splash screens here, and these will be in product for you. And then as we go into our agenda, today we are jam-packed, so I'm trying to breeze through this quickly for you. As you can see on the screen, we've got a lot to share. There's been a lot of work behind the scenes in this release from many partners, many architects, many developers, and so we're really excited about it. So we want to share that with you, obviously. Throughout this, there will be a combination of live sessions and recorded pieces of this, which allows you to stay engaged and ask any questions that you might have throughout the broadcast. And the team that you just met will be behind the scenes answering those questions. So you're more than welcome to hold those into the QA at the end. But throughout the webinar broadcast, we really encourage you to ask those questions as they come up, so you don't forget about them. We'll start off with C++ and the focus there and what we've done with the IDE and C++ Builder. Then we'll move through a few of the different pieces of our tool chain into Delphi updates, FireMonkey, Skia update, VCL. And so there's a lot here, as you can see. So we'll try to go ahead and move through this quickly. But we really appreciate you being here with us today. And again, just a reminder, ask questions. We will have follow-ups throughout, follow-up webinars as well on specific pieces of this. But don't be shy, and thanks for joining us.
Hello, David here, and I want to start with what I think is one of the most amazing things we've ever done for RAD Studio, and that's the inclusion of Visual Assist for C++. Visual Assist is a sister product within IDE and is a productivity plugin for C++ and C# developers using Visual Studio. Pretty much any software you use has been written with its help. I can't name names, but I can say that you've likely used multiple items of software already today, or even possibly to watch this right now, that Visual Assist helped create. It really helps productivity, and it's been a key part of Windows C++ development for years, and now it's joined C++ Builder. We had a preview webinar in August, but we showed you only a few things in that webinar. What we're delivering in RAD Studio 12 goes past what we showed in our preview. We are shipping more features than we previewed. I'm going to start off with some good features, and there's a whole host of great things, and move on to showing you something that I think is about the most amazing feature ever. Let's begin with code completion. In C++ Builder 12, we still support LSP and cQuery, but by default, all code insight features are provided by Visual Assist, and that includes tooltips and parameter completion, which we haven't even got time to cover here, and just for the sake of time, that single sentence is it for describing those features. But when using Visual Assist for Code Insight, you are using a new Code Insight engine. Focusing on the code completion part of Code Insight, it's important to note that this is very different to our previous code completion. Don't expect the same thing. Previous code completion was essentially based on a compiler, and so often required code to be in good compilable shape, and its results were always from the compiler, and therefore completely 100% correct. Visual Assist, though, has a fuzzy parser, and it can happily handle code that won't compile. It'll do everything it can to understand the code no matter what. And although Visual Assist obviously parses and understands your code and presents completion based on the type of your symbols as you'd expect, as well as a flexible fuzzy parser, is also heuristic in results. As well as completely standard suggestions, it will suggest things that may or may not be what you're looking for, so you will get different behavior than with cQuery or even classic completion. It is also very fast, incredibly fast. Even better, it can suggest things that technically it doesn't even know about. In the screenshot on the left, you can see it suggesting the standard library map classes. But the code that it's suggesting inside, the code where the text cursor is placed and you're completing in, doesn't have the headers for stdmap or multimap or unordered map included. So, how does Visual Assist know how to suggest them? Well, other than magic, it can do this because it's not aware just of the current file and what the current file uses or includes, the way previous code completion was, but because it's aware of the entire set of headers available to your project. And so it can suggest things you might want to use, whether those are standard library types or even types in your own project you just haven't added the include for yet. A natural question might be, can Visual Assist both suggest something in code completion and also add the include for you? And I'll get back to that in a minute. But that's code completion as provided by Visual Assist, which is the default now in 12.0. Definitely different. It's the same feature, but not an exact replacement, and you'll likely have the best success with it regarding it as something new. It's fast, amazingly fast. It's fuzzy, it produces results even when code doesn't compile, and is heuristic, and it can even suggest things that aren't even in your code yet. Let's move on to refactorings. In the webinar preview in August, we previewed one refactoring. Well, we're shipping 4, 2 major ones and 2 minor ones. And these address common things you need to do in your code. Refactoring is all about code maintenance. As you develop, you need to change code, you need to move it around, keep it up to date, change things. That's what refactorings are there to help you do. And the key things we've added in version 12 help you rename a method or type anywhere it's used in your project group. This is what we previewed in the August webinar. But there are other things you might want to do, such as automatically add the right include for the code you've written. Or, taking some inspiration from a Delphi feature, you might want to write a method and have the declaration automatically added, or vice versa, write a method declaration and get the implementation automatically added. And that's what we have, so let's have a look at these live. First, let's look at rename refactoring. Renaming something is a very useful operation, so we'll use this test app, which is a small but non-trivial real-world app which we publish on our GitHub, to demonstrate. You can rename anything, but here I'm going to rename the grid type because it's a key type used throughout the program. You can see when I open the dialog, it lists all the references it finds to grid, and there are checkboxes to control where it looks. Note that you can rename across an entire project group, not just one project, which is key. And also note that Visual Assist can find references in comments and strings. Refactoring is about code maintenance, and it's not good maintenance if your comments get out of date. So we can scroll through this and give a quick visual check what it will rename. It looks good. And also ensure that we check the checkbox next to the comment it found so it will rename there. And when we click rename, it renames through the entire project and project group. Note when I go find that comment that it's renamed there too, which is unusual for any refactoring tool, but not for Visual Assist, because Visual Assist does things that are meant to be useful and go beyond what other tools provide. And of course, if I recompile, you can see the app still builds. A fundamental test, and a very good one. Let's move on to the next refactoring, add include. In the slide earlier, we mentioned code completion, and that it could complete for types that aren't even in the current unit yet. To demonstrate this, let's add a completely blank unit, and you can see that other than its own header, it has no other includes, and it does not know about key types. It does not know about C++ strings or vectors or maps, and does not know about even the types defined elsewhere in this program, because we haven't included them. So let's write some code, and we'll add two types. A system include like map, and one of our own apps types. We have code here that needs some include files added. Visual Assist works very tightly integrated to the symbol that your text cursor is in, which is worth remembering if you want to invoke functionality, that you need to put your cursor in the token that you want to do something with. For us, that's map. Let me put my text caret there, and then in the refactor main menu, you can see add include, and it tells us which header it's going to add, map. When I click that, it's added. Let me do the same now for grid. This time I'll use the editor context menu, and you can see again it tells us that for the grid type it's going to add a specific header. Now I have the two includes added at the top of my unit. Let's do this for a more complex case. Rather than a new blank unit, I'll go to some existing code. Now this unit is UE agnostic. It has no UE code at all. It doesn't know anything about drawing or buttons or anything, and we could include it into a VCL app or a command line app if we wanted. And I'll add a bit of code referring to a UE control, a T button. When I right-click and add include, you can see we'll add the include for fmx.studcontrols.hpp. Now, there's a T button type in both FireMonkey and VCL. How does it know to use a FireMonkey header when we're adding an include in a file that has no FireMonkey present? The answer is that Visual Assist is aware of the framework you're using for your app and is able to know that you need the FireMonkey or VCL versions of a header. And this is the same for any other situation when it needs to resolve and find information about a type. And we've seen two things today. We've seen code completing types that the current code isn't even aware of, including with both types in our own project group, and the STL or any other headers that count as system headers, like the ones in Get It. And we've seen including the right include file for any type just by right-clicking it and selecting Add Include. Now let's move on to the two smaller code generation or refactoring operations, which also live in the refactor main menu and the editor context menu's refactor submenu. Let me add a method to the grid class. Now, normally I need to go into the grid.cpp file and add the implementation, which is fine, but it's the kind of work that I should be able to automate. If I now right-click my new method, and remember that I have to click the name itself like everything else with Visual Assist, and select Rename, Create Implementation, you can see Visual Assist goes ahead and creates a skeleton implementation for me. You can do the same in reverse and use Create Declaration if you create a method and want the declaration added. So those are the refactorings we've added to our initial Visual Assist integration. We have two large or major refactoring tools to rename any symbol and to add the include file for any type, and two smaller ones where you can automatically add a declaration or implementation. For the final set of features out of Code Insight, refactoring, and navigations, let's look at navigations. Navigation is another key strength of Visual Assist, and we have some really useful features here. Rather than have a lot of slides, I'm just going to jump straight into a demo, starting off with the small ones and finishing with my absolute favorite feature in Visual Assist. First, the smallest feature, but actually a feature that is one of the most highly voted requests we have for C++ Builder. A few minutes ago, we looked at automatically creating the implementation or declaration for a method, but it's also really useful to quickly jump between the implementation and declaration. This is a fast way to get between methods, and also just a fast way to get to the class header or a useful part of your code. In Delphi, you can do this via Control-Shift up or down arrow, and we've added this to C++ Builder now too. As you can see, I am toggling between the method we just added in the header and the CPP file entirely via the keyboard. Just as an aside, I've stressed that for Visual Assist you always need the editor cursor to be in the relevant symbol, not just nearby. This feature is an exception to the rule and will work when the cursor is in empty space in the method too. It doesn't have to be in the method name. There are also menu items for this because we think key functionality should be available in menus, not just hidden behind shortcuts, and you can find this in the search menu as Go to Definition and Go to Implementation. These menus are present for Delphi as well now too, which is why they don't have the Visual Assist tomato icon, even though for C++ they're implemented with Visual Assist. The menus let you specifically go to whichever one you want, but the Control-Shift up or down shortcut simply toggles. Let's move on to a major code understanding and navigation tool, Find References. Find References is a tool that lets you find where something in your code, like a class or method or anything, is used or referred to. In fact, Rename Refactoring uses this under the hood, because in order to rename everything, Rename has to know all the references to whatever it's renaming. And it's very useful for you, because Find References lets you find any code that uses the code you're looking at now. Let's try it. What parts of this app use the binary tree method? Right-click, Find, and Find References. Okay, that's not very many. Let's try something larger. What about the cell type? I can go to Search, Find References, and it will show me. You can see this type is used extensively throughout the app, and not only does it tell me every reference, but it tries to give a bit of information about the class or method where it's used on the left too, such as this one, where you can see the reference to cell is in the aldus method. Of course, I can double-click or press Enter and go there. Find References is not just a code understanding tool, but a navigation tool too. We also have a menu item to find references in Unit. Find References by default looks in your project, and you can click a toolbar button to look in your entire project group. Find References in Unit is similar and just looks in the current unit, which is useful when you're trying to do what is effectively a local search and know you want something in your current code and there's no need to look through the entire app. Note that Find References is not a search. It's based on parsing your code and is a database query. In other words, it's not a text search. And that means that the references it returns are the actual real references in code. The next feature, and wow, there are a lot of features we're shipping, is find symbol. This lets you find any symbol that Visual Assist knows about, and this is not just symbols in your code directly, but all the headers your code uses and all the headers they use and so on. Let's invoke it. You can see in the title bar that it knows about 160,000 symbols, and you can search for any of them. I'll type get window, and you can see it updating live. That's very fast response. It's searching constantly as I type through over 160,000 symbols here. You can see it found many results, but selected the most likely, which is the Windows API method getWindow. And this is what I mean about find symbol finding anything and knows about the Windows headers, for example, among all the other headers available to it. If I search for something else like grid, you can see it shows the grid header, the macro in the header that's in my project, and a few lines below the grid class. Here I want to demonstrate some of the other search features. I can click a checkbox to search only for symbols in the project group rather than searching everything Visual Assist knows about. And you can see the results changed immediately to a much narrower set. I can also search for only classes, structs, and namespaces, and immediately it shows just the one matching result, the class grid. These are very powerful because find symbol will find anything, and these options help you filter down results. There are also search filters, so I can search for words that begin or start with a certain term. If I type MN, it gives me results containing column and columns. If I put a period at the end, MN dot, it means that I want results that end with MN, and you can see that only matches two symbols. I can also put a dot at the beginning to find only symbols that start with the search term. So just as a quick recap, find references is to start with a symbol in your code and find references to where it's used, whereas find symbol is to find any symbol that exists anywhere. Next, let's have a quick look at GoToMember. This is a small but useful navigation which lists, and lets you navigate to, of course, all the member fields and properties and methods of a type. So if I put my cursor in the symbol, I'll use grid again, you can see that it lists every method and field in the grid type. But it's a bit smarter than that. If I put my cursor in this expression, image viewer arrow bitmap with my cursor inside bitmap and go search GoToMember, it knows this part of the expression refers to a T bitmap, and it shows me the members there. In fact, I can even put my cursor in the assign method call, and it knows it's a call on the tBitmap type. And so when I click GoToMember, it will show me the members of tBitmap. And of course, you can search and filter and go to any of the members. Now, I've saved the best for last. There is one more menu that we have not looked at yet today, and it's my favorite. And that is this menu item, Go to Related. This is, in my personal opinion, the most amazing feature ever, and I have used it any number of times since we first got it integrated. Go to Related's job is to see what you clicked on and let you navigate to anything useful related to it. It is so useful, we've integrated this more closely than the normal main menu or editor context menu. RAD Studio has a feature where you can hold Control, and as you move your mouse, symbols turn into hyperlinks, and you can click them to go to their definition. And in C++ Builder 11.3 and before, we had that. In C++ Builder 12, control clicking on any symbol instead invokes GoToRelated, because one of the related things is going to a definition, that's still there, but you can go to a whole lot more. So while I can use the search or context menu GoToRelated, for this demo I'm going to hold the Control key down and click on things. Let's start small, something basic, a namespace. This app has a namespace maze which is used in multiple areas, and you can see it used here in this method. If I control click on it to invoke GoToRelated, I get a menu popping up, and this lists all of the definitions of the maze namespace. If I expand the menu, you can see everywhere that I have defined the namespace. And of course, click on to go there. Now this might give you a hint where this feature is going. Let me now click on a member variable named mpgrid. The menu pops up and I can go to the declaration. Great, that's where it's defined. But I can also go to the types of the variable through this types of symbol menu. And this variable is a unique pointer of grid. And you'll see Visual Assist knows that, and both are listed here and I can navigate to either. This means that you can find and navigate to the various types that make up a type, in that Visual Assist will allow you to separate the template specializations and navigate to each one. Even better, I can also invoke the GoToMember dialog for both this variable and even for the form that it's a member field of. You can start to see what we mean here by GoToRelated. It picks up anything useful and lets you go there. But we are just getting started. One of the key things about object-oriented architecture, like C++, is polymorphic inheritance. So let's find a class that inherits from other classes, and in turn has other classes inheriting from it. A good example is tCustomButton in the FireMonkey framework. Of course, this works for any class at all, VCL classes, your classes, anything. If I control-click the type name, tCustomButton, we can go to the definition and go to a member. We can also go to the constructor, which is useful. But what's really neat is that you can find the ancestor classes for this type. Here, when I mouse over base classes, it shows all the ancestors. I can click to go to any of them. What's equally useful is that I can see the derived classes when I mouse over the derived classes submenu. Note the caret symbols that show how deeply nested the inheritance is. This lets you at a glance see what classes inherit from a type anywhere in your project group and go there. This works clicking any type, so even though I'm now at the tSpeedButton declaration, I have the type name tCustomButton on the screen and I can control-click that to see the same menu. Or I can control-click any other type. What about tBasicAction here? You can see how it has 3 ancestors, but has quite a few derived types. And note again that you can see how derived they are by how indented they are. This is incredibly useful. It lets you navigate through the entire inheritance tree of your software, starting from any point in that tree up and down. But it doesn't stop there. What about virtual methods? Let's try tBasicAction and I'll go to its constructor. Again, control-click to invoke GoToRelated. There's a virtual update method, and if I control-click that, you can see that this time, because I clicked a method, instead of a derived type submenu, I have a derived symbol submenu. And expanding it, the update method is overridden by 6 descendant methods, and of course I can now go to any of them. This too is incredibly useful because a big part of object-oriented programming is dealing with or understanding what method is actually called, what overrides there are, what method implementations exist, and moving between all the related classes and methods. Now, Visual Assist is not just a simple integration into C++ Builder. It knows about C++ Builderisms, like properties, and we haven't touched on that yet, but now's a good time. We just looked at virtual methods and seeing the ancestor method implementations and derived overrides. There's a method here that is dynamic, and that is an entirely custom kind of method that is effectively virtual but internally different in how it's called. But to be useful in C++ Builder, we had to teach Visual Assist that dynamic methods exist and what they are. And sure enough, if I control-click this dynamic method execute, you can see it lists the derived overrides of the method correctly. Let's look at properties too. If I control-click one of the properties, you can see that Visual Assist shows where the property has been redeclared in the descendant types. And of course, you can go to member, and the listing of members includes the properties, as well as the backing field and setter method. GoToRelated works on pretty much anything. You can even try it on header files. You can see what other files a header includes, and then even see what files the header is included by. And there's more. We're out of time, but when you install RAD Studio 12, just go around control-clicking on stuff and see what you get. So that's Visual Assist in C++ Builder and RAD Studio 12, an amazing initial integration. You have code completion. It's different to the past. Don't expect the same. It's new, different, it's fast, and heuristic. You have multiple refactorings. Rename any symbol, add the right include file for any type, and create method implementations and declarations. And then you have a whole heap of navigations, tools to help you understand the structure of your code and move swiftly around it. Find references, find symbol, toggling between the implementation and declaration, go to member, and go to related, which takes you to anything useful related to whatever you click on, to the declaration and constructor and base and derived types and base and derived virtuals, and I think is the most amazing feature ever. And it's all got C++ Builder extras. It understands code that uses things like properties. This is huge for your daily productivity, for moving around and understanding code. It's fast, speedy, contextual, and I think is one of the best things we've ever added to the product. I can't wait for you to try it, and don't forget that CBuilder and RAD Studio 12 are out right now. Let's move over to the other big news for C++ in RAD Studio 12. We've discussed before, both in a blog and a webinar, that we're upgrading our C++ compiler, and in fact, not just the compiler, but the entire toolchain. For the sake of time, I won't go into too much detail, but we're aiming at excellent tools such as a new linker, at using platform standards like the PDB debug format and the COF object file format, at multi-standard library and more, such as allowing new code optimizations that were not previously possible. We're using a lot of LLVM and related tools, and the toolchain is looking really exciting. It uses the universal C runtime for the C-level RTL, which is a standard Windows component. It uses a custom C++ runtime. And it uses LLVM's libc++ for the STL, which has great standards conformance. Redoing things like the custom C++ level runtime really emphasizes our approach of doing it right, where things like, for example, exception handling and SEH are fully reworked for excellent compatibility and correct behavior. We're even replacing the linker, which will be exciting for those of you with very large projects. And of course, all this is keeping everything that makes C++ Builder C++ Builder, such as supporting Delphi using things like properties and of course much more. This is available as a preview in RAD Studio 12. One of the big themes with this toolchain is doing it right, and that means taking our time, thus shipping a preview, not the final release. However, the preview is very exciting, and we expect many of you will want to test it out. For the build in the 12.0 release, the compiler is focused on pure C++. In other words, you can't yet create a VCL or FMX application in the build that we have today, although Delphi extensions like property are working. You can, however, test out the C++ tech that we're using, build using the command line, but you can debug within the IDE itself. Let me show you using some code I used for a webinar earlier this year, which measured the performance of C++ maps. This code was written with Visual C++, but I'm using it unaltered with the new Win64 toolchain, as you'd expect. For the sake of pointing it out, if I'd written it with C++ Builder, it should also work unaltered, as you'd expect. We're aiming at excellent compatibility, of course, with the previous C++ Builder, which goes unsaid, but also with other toolchains and general C++ code. I can build it on the command line. Here I'm building statically and emitting PDB debug info, mainly just for the sake of the demo. Note that the compiler is invoking the LD LLVM linker. We aren't using ilink anymore. In the IDE, I can go to the Run menu and then use either Attach to Process if it's already running, or Load Process, and select the modern Win64 LDB debugger for C++. Make sure you choose that, not the other C++ debugger. If I place a breakpoint, you can see it pausing. What's notable is that you'll see its CRT in the messages view, and you would see it loading the libc++ STL if I'd built dynamically, and it's loading PDB debug info. So that's the technical preview of the upgraded Clang toolchain. Command line building, but IDE debugging at this stage. It's completely reworked, using platform standards, capable and performant STL and more. There's a large amount of work that's gone on under the hood to get us to this stage, and we think you'll find testing it out very exciting, especially if you've ever wanted to move away from ilink, use specific STL templates, or anything else where this new toolchain has a very strong emphasis on quality and being the absolute best it can be. And it is the best. We are approaching this with a strong focus on doing it right, and we're definitely looking forward to your feedback now and as we continue with it. Now let's have a look at what's new in the installer and IDE. RAD Studio 12 has a new UE for the Feature Manager, which we often used to call the Platform Manager, but it allows you to enable and install many features too, so Feature Manager it is. The old one had multiple pages, but this new one is a single window where you choose the languages you want to use, the platforms you want to support, and the extras you want on the right-hand side. Very simple. There's also much better error reporting, and while we hope there are never errors, this will make anything that happens much easier to solve. And of course, it's all built with standard VCL controls, uses VCL styles, and supports IDPI. A small but neat feature we've added in the IDE is a light form of syntax highlighting in the various windows that display code snippets, or display info about code in some other way. This includes the editor dropdowns, the structure view, watches, and so forth. My favorite is the call stack. It really highlights the key information, as you can see on screen. And when our engineer checked it in and I first tested it out, I found that going back to 11.3 or turning it off felt like a real loss, which is a sign of a good feature. It's different syntax highlighting to in the editor. For example, on the call stack screen, you can see it renders the key method names as bold. I find that like all syntax highlighting, this one really helps make key areas of what I'm reading clear. And it's very useful for code in all the parts of the IDE where code is displayed that's not part of the code editor. Now to cover the next portion, over to Nunu for a few minutes.
Hello everyone, and thank you David for passing along the microphone. I'm very glad to be here today talking with all of you about RAD Studio 12.0. This is a very exciting release for us with a lot of news. And without any further ado, let's jump straight into our next new feature. This feature is a multi-device icon generator that allows us to generate icons and splash screens for all screen resolutions at once. This including the Android's adaptive icon and all of it embedded within the IDE. And actually in this case, to showcase this feature, I will do a live demo. So let's jump straight into RAD Studio, where all we need to do is to create a blank application, for example. And from here, go into Project, Options, and on the left, choose the Icons tab and click on the Artwork Generator button. However, since I want to create icons for all platforms at once, what I will do first is I will press in this drop down, click on All Configurations, and now click Artwork Generator. What this will do is allow me to, from one single image or from one single source, create the icons for all the available platforms. As you can see, we have several options. We can use an image or use text. We can change the background layer. We can change the shape of the icon. However, to give better results, we highly recommend you to use SVGs. So that's what I will be doing in this demo. So I'll just press Image, go into my Downloads folder and choose a previous SVG that I chose. Click OK, and from here I'll show you something. We can change the scale. Let me put it back at 100%. We can choose if the background is solid or an image. In this case, I'll go into solid. We can change the colors also, for example. From here, I think the sky blue looks nice. And we can decide if it will be a rectangle, if it will slightly rounded. I'll go with rounded. Click Next. Now I'll have to choose the options for the Android adaptive icon. It looks pretty similar. So in this case, I will just decide to go Next also. On splash screens, here we have the options to choose the splash screen for several themes, for the dark and white themes. Here is for the white theme, and I will just adjust the scale a little bit so the icon doesn't look too small on the screen. And for example, for the dark mode, instead of sky blue, I will go with the black background. Now pressing next and finish. And that will be it. Now, if you go into the drop-down and select any of the platforms, you will see that all of the icons were generated for every single platform. Another cool thing that this feature can do is, let's say that, for example, for Windows 32-bit platform, you wanted something different, you can actually go here and change the icons just for this platform exactly the same way as we did before, and it will only affect this platform and not the others, which I think is pretty cool. And that's it. I hope everyone enjoyed this new feature, and now I'll pass the microphone to David again. David, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Nuno. We spoke a lot earlier about Code Insight for C++ with Visual Assist, but Delphi definitely has some work this release too. In 12.0, Delphi LSP mainly focuses on quality and stability, and we even have a menu item to restart the server if you need, but we do have some smaller features. For example, code completion has always completed braces for methods, but now it completes square brackets for array types, including array properties. Similarly, we tweaked displaying colors in the completion list. Language keywords are included in completion, which is really useful, and code templates have improvements for where they appear. There's also a small but useful change where the various keys you can press that have an effect on code completion, such as which ones accept what's currently selected, are displayed on screen, and there may be more than you realized. We've also been working on auto-invocation of code completion. You might have noticed that some of the features I just mentioned are code completion features that existed in previous versions of Delphi, or that we've made behave more like previous versions of Delphi. And it's been a matter of us going through the history of the product and ensuring that we keep or re-implement the best parts. Auto-invocation is similar. In the past, before LSP, there was a setting so that you could pause typing and code completion would pop up after a short delay. This is back, though it's off by default, and we have some ideas for what to do with it in future releases too. The overall message here is that Delphi code completion is just working better. The IDE similarly has a lot of smaller features. One really useful one is that you can close a tab and then reopen it exactly as it was, including where the cursor was positioned, how far you were scrolled, what regions were open or collapsed, and so forth. The VCL designer now also shows custom colors when they're set for controls. The title bar supports the Windows 11 snap layouts, and searching lets you exclude folders with some good defaults for both Delphi and C++. There are a whole set of small but useful tweaks and features throughout the IDE that pay attention to productivity and doing what you expect. These small, useful features are because 12.0 has a heavy quality focus in the IDE. You might have picked up a theme of quality that certainly carries through here, and we've worked in areas such as multiple editor windows, or searching, where there were some odd behaviors in 11.3, various quirks of the form designer in high DPI mode, and more. One notable area is GDI resource usage, when you have a large number of components installed, where we cut the usage down by just under 2/3. Overall, the small things have a big focus, and quality has a big focus in this release. On the debugger side, one change we already noted is that the new Win64 debugger uses LDB15 in the PDB debug format, and that means you can use the IDE to debug anything with PDB. Some other changes are that messages from PA server show in the messages view. You can see the operating system thread handle, and something that's especially useful for mobile are improvements to when the debugger is not responding. It's often genuinely taking some time for an action, and we have a new wait button to let the IDE know it needs to keep waiting. That means you'll get a message sooner in case there really is a problem, but also that the delay grows each time you press wait, and this seems to work really well when the app or debugger is just taking some time to do something. Finally, on the Tools API, we put a strong focus on the Tools API, which lets you build plugins and extensions for the IDE, and we add new APIs often to let you build whatever you want to build, and through that we've seen some pretty cool things. You can do almost anything with it that we can internally. For example, to go back a few releases, when we added Delphi LSP, we added a new asynchronous code completion API, which the LSP implementation was built on. And that means that if you ever wanted to implement code completion yourself, asynchronously and in a modern style, you could, using the same APIs that we used to build that. Similarly, we recently added comprehensive support for painting in the code editor, as well as getting information about the code editors and what's on screen. And in 12.0, we've continued to evolve that. You can now query more information about each line, such as if it has a blue dot or some other general line status, or each cell, which is each character effectively, such as if it's part of SyncEdit. This means that, if you wanted to, you could fully custom paint the editor, and it certainly means that any markup or additions you want to add can be done with access to full information. We also added new APIs for reading and writing to the editor. These are useful if you want to write a plugin that edits code in the editor, or read what's on screen, or read what's under the text cursor, or similar. Now, we had and still have existing APIs to read and write the contents of the editor buffer, but they provided a file-like interface, so you had to read or write a lot to get to where you wanted. The new APIs are more low-level and support random access to read or write a random line, and they are much faster. If you have plugins in mind that want to access the contents of the editor for any reason, we strongly recommend checking out the new APIs in version 12. Finally, there's just a bunch of miscellaneous improvements, things like getting the token at the current editor caret, or helping you set up the IDE title bar in your plugin windows, or giving access to the same message dialogues the IDE uses, a whole bunch of general quality, and more. As always, we really want to encourage you to experiment with the Tools API. Write some plugins and see what you can do. You can do anything. Now I'll hand over to Marco.
Thanks, David. This is Marco, and I'm going to guide you through the libraries that ship with RAD Studio, covering the changes we have done for 12.0. Let's start with FireMonkey. There is really a lot new in FireMonkey in this release. There is Skia graphic library support, and we'll get into that in more detail soon. There is a redesign of the style version of the input control, which serves as tedit and tmemo, depending if it's a single or multiple lines. Android API 33 support for Delphi. New icons and splash screen designers we have already covered. Split views for mobile platforms, which is really a small but relevant feature, and a lot of other change in terms of features and quality. But let me start with Skia. So what is Skia? Why Skia? Skia is a very powerful library for 2D. It has high performance, good rendering, are unknown to us and to our libraries, and it's becoming the new foundation for FireMonkey. So the relevance of Skia is not just an additional feature, but is really a foundation work we are doing for the future of the library. Again, it's an open source library. It's backed by some big companies. It's the engine behind Flutter, but also Google Chrome, among many other products. And you can read on skia.org all of the relevant information about the library. How do we leverage Skia? We integrate in 12.0 out of the box, so everything is ready for you. Skia for Delphi, which is a cross-platform 2D library, which provides the ability of Skia, the APIs of Skia, to Delphi. This is an open source project. We have worked extensively with the developers of the project, providing not only the core features of Skia for Delphi, but we are also adding additional capabilities on top of it, which are unique to RAD Studio 12.0. I could go through all of the features in Skia, all of the capabilities, the graphic formats. I won't do it. There's really too much to go into each of these elements, but the main point is this become automatically available as part of FireMonkey, so there isn't much you have to do to enable this large amount of extensions to your existing FireMonkey applications. Now, how do you use Skia in RAD Studio? There are multiple ways of doing it. It depends on what we're looking for. One option, which is probably not the most common one I would expect, is just using the Skia API. The API is available through a unit. This is a small example. You can really just start coding against the Skia API. There are other and easier ways to leverage Skia in a RAD Studio application. The first and the easiest one is through specific UI controls that you can use and which provide extensive features that are not found in the core platform controls. A very good example is the label, which is depicted here. As you can see, the label is a bit more than a label. It has multiple line of text or multiple text elements. Each of them has its own coloring, capabilities, spacing. You can specify letter spacing and some very, very advanced text rendering elements. The third way to use Skia in RAD Studio is just to say, hey, use Skia for the styled UI controls. As you know, FireMonkey primarily uses style controls. Turn on the global use Skia setting in FireMonkey. So it's one operation, one very simple thing you have to do in your code, and your application can move from the existing implementation in terms of rendering, which could be Metal, could be DirectX, could be OpenGL, towards using Skia with one global setting. It's really straightforward to move up an application from a different engine for rendering to Skia. There is another level of usage that's also interesting, which is codecs for image controls and image formats. In this case, there is really nothing you have to do. Skia enables these new image encodings for the existing VCL and FireMonkey image controls. So you don't need to use a specific, the UI controls in Skia available for both platforms. And this is a bit more information about those controls: animated image, label, paint box, animated paint box, and SVG. Let me show an actual example of some of the additional controls beside the label that I was displaying earlier. The animated image control can display animations in a number of formats. You can see Lottie, you can see Telegram stickers, you can see animated GIF, and animated WebP. The paint box allows you to do freehand painting and allows you to display very advanced graphics, including, for example, gradients. And the SVG, as the name implies, allows you to display SVG images. And notice that these controls, the animated image, the image, and so forth, they are all available in VCL beside FireMonkey. So as a summary, Skia support in FireMonkey is available for both C++ Builder and Delphi. It's available for FireMonkey and also for VCL. It leverages the Skia for Delphi open source project. But the other thing I want to point out, it includes additional capabilities not in the open source project, which are very relevant. Vulkan support, it's a different graphic engine that is available on Android. So using Skia with Vulkan should provide a much better experience than just using OpenGLS. The Skia shading language for effects and filters is also available as a unique feature in the RAD Studio 12.0. The WebP encoder, which I showed earlier, and the ability to natively print for Windows and do PDF printing for all platforms. So you can take a form and render as a PDF, or take content and paint as you would paint on the screen on a PDF surface, and then generate a PDF file, which could be handy to support some sort of printing on mobile. Finally, we are also using Skia support for the new icon and splash wizard that was demonstrated earlier. Now, while Skia is a foundation for FireMonkey, it's not the only thing we did for the library in 12.0. We also did a significant rework of the tedit and tmemo controls. That's something that started in 11.3, but is now available across all platforms. We did a lot of change in FireMonkey to support this feature. There are new properties like auto select, character case. We improved the undo and redo with an improved undo manager component. Address a lot of positioning of the caret for edits on Windows, and implemented a lot of additional features Same for iOS. We did some further improvements there for the T-edit, and for Android even more, specifically with the management of the cursor and the position, the proper rendering for the current point, and support for gestures. Beside Skia and the T-edit control, there is further work done in FireMonkey. I won't even go through each of these items in detail, but they are relevant. They help us improving the quality and the library quite a bit. What I want to point out is the Universal T-Font Manager, universal meaning all platforms, and also in particular the ability to do split views or split screen on mobile platforms. So what we enable is the ability to have a FireMonkey application taking only a portion of the screen, not the entire screen. This is an example of a phone with a FireMonkey application and the browser, and also the ability at runtime to resize the form and have the proper layout recalculated and updated, similarly to what happens on desktop, where you generally are able to resize a form. That is all for FireMonkey, and it is a lot. Now let's focus on the VCL library. We've done a lot of work also in VCL. We have reworked the MDI architecture. This was a massive effort, way more than it seems from the outside, because on the outside we are just making MDI work. It's a significant effort that we did to take care of a number of cases where the underlying Windows platform support for MDI is fairly broken, specifically when you move to a high DPI screen. The idea was simply try to make sure that if you have existing MDI applications, and I know a lot of our customers have existing large MDI applications, we're offering to this application the ability to be rebuilt in RAD Studio 12 and work much better on high DPI, and also work very nicely, actually even better than on high DPI, when using high DPI and VCL styles. And the reason is because we take even more control of the non-client area when using styles, so we can fix all of the scenarios. Here you can see an MDI application running. It's actually a very simple, straightforward one, but it gives you an idea of it running with styles. In this page instead, you can see the differences between application. This is a very simple test that we created, and what you can see in 11.3 is the icons in the title bar of the MDI window are not painted correctly. They are extremely small, again because this is high DPI, and these are painted by the operating system. So what we did, and you can see it on the right, is we took over painting from the operating system, and now we are painting the icons at the size they should be. So this is just one of the examples, but there are many more. Another example is in the version with styles. Below the blue screen, it shows a minimized form. Minimized forms in MDI at the platform level are calculated in a completely wrong size. We have been able to improve significantly the rendering of the MDI forms. We also updated the wizard. The wizard allows you to generate a new MDI application that works significantly better. And the wizard also showcases another feature, which is the ability to use tabs. Let me explain this a little more. MDI is a very old-fashioned UI. I know a lot of customers still use it. Their customers want to use it. They're used to it for 20 years. Why change? Rather than changing and getting rid of MDI, what we are recommending is not only to adapt MDI with these new cleanup features, but also move towards a tab architecture. And this can be done by mixing MDI and tabs. So this is truly an MDI application, but what it adds is a tab component that is automatically displaying a tab for each of the active windows. This is a sort of a hybrid scenario, mixing MDI and a tab architecture. Of course, what you can aim for over time is get rid of the separate resizable windows within the tabs and go for child windows that take the full screen, and so move towards a full tab architecture. And we are making it much easier to build a tab architecture with this new T-form tabs bar control. It hosts child controls. It creates a modern looking tab-like interface. It's something a lot of developers had already implemented on their own, but now it is out of the box in VCL, easily available, very flexible, powerful, and easy to customize because it's based on a very clean and robust underlying architecture, including this iForm Visual Manager interface that is what manages the underlying set of child windows. Let me go quickly through a demo of building an MDI application using the wizard. I just go to that page. The wizard has no additional requests or options. It's only going to ask you for a folder where to put the generated files. Select one, and you will get a full working application, although very simple. This is the application that was generated with an action list, action manager, image collection, and modern UI style and lookup, plus the new form tabs bar component. Let's run it. And as you can see, we can create multiple child forms. They automatically are listed here. If you minimize one of the forms, it is hidden to obtain a nicer graphic. That was the default the platform does by default, and you can see that the matching element here is grayed out. Of course, you can close items from here. You can reposition the sequence. The selected item gets up front, and by clicking on the disabled or hidden form, it's displayed again on screen. That might not sound completely different from what was available in the past, and it is still based on the core underlying MDI architecture provided by Windows, but the change to VCL in this area has been really extensive. And for example, what you can do now, if you have an application with two forms, you can just add one form as a parent of another one, of the one we're creating dynamically here. And the net effect is quite interesting because the form will be created in the context of the hosting form or the parent form with a full resizable and working border. This is not MDI. This is purely form nesting, which is a brand new feature in VCL for the RAD Studio 12 release. While this improved MDI and child window support is the most relevant feature in VCL in 12.0, there is actually a lot more. One new feature is the way tfont scales. We have reworked the tfont class so that the size property of the font adapts to the DPI. This is different from the past, where size was remaining the same and then the painting code was adapting to the DPI. We have also added a new enumerator for tcontrol. An enumerator allows you to do a for in loop rather than on the component, which has been for a long time in the product. Now you can enumerate child controls navigating through the child hierarchy. There are a lot of different filters you can use to determine if you only want to enumerate the enabled, visible, disabled controls, and also the ability to have a custom event handler to determine if a control should be part of the list being enumerated, depending on its status in a totally custom way. We have added tile view support to the t-list view. We have improved the number box control. We have improved the control list control, which is also used in the new installer and in the welcome page. We have added improvements to the title bar control, so it has support for snap layouts. That includes the RAD Studio IDE itself. The image and image collections have a way to disable the GDI handles if an image is not currently in use. That can save a lot of the GDI resources, which is still a scarce resource in Windows. We have added new activity indicator types, which you can see here. Ability to show a form in the taskbar independently of the form status. Previously, the library was determining whether a form was in the taskbar. Now you can have full direct control of it. Windows 11 specific features like rounded corners and enable immersive dark mode are also exposed at the form level. Finally, there is a lot of work on double buffering. That's a bit more complicated than I can cover here, so I'm going to skip any of the details. And that's all about VCL. Let me move now to data including FireDuck, web technologies, and so forth. First, we have created a new JSON data binding wizard for Delphi. This is specifically for Delphi. The idea is that rather than mapping JSON to tJSON classes, tJSON value, tJSON object, tJSON array, and so forth, you want to improve your code by mapping JSON data structure to actual classes in your application. So what we've built is a wizard that can take an existing JSON text and generate the objects to map to, and generate the mapping code using one of two alternative options that are available in our libraries. One is the REST JSON mapping layer, and the other is the system JSON serializers. Long story short, you can go through this wizard, simply configure if you want the fields to be mapped to properties, to fields, which format, how you handle array types, and so forth. You can, of course, map to your own custom data types if you want. And what you get at the end is a bunch of classes which can be used directly to map the code to JSON. As an example of the JSON wizard, I've taken this JSON, which is actually coming from json.org. I've used it in the wizard to generate matching JSON classes that you can see here for each of the data structures in that JSON. This, again, is fully generated code with the window object, t-image, t-text, and other objects inside it. Not only it has the structure of the code, but it also offers at the higher level some memory management code. So as you're creating the topmost object, it is going to create and destroy the required sub-objects for you. That means that the code that you use to read this JSON in memory into a set of objects, not tJSON data structures, is 2 lines. This is all you need to say that you want to use the JSON serializer library and create a my object based on the JSON mapper from the text of the memo. And then at this point, we can read some of the elements of this data structure. Again, here we're just using pure Pascal code, accesses to object and sub-objects, rather than having to use JSON-based data access. If we run it, you can see this works, and you can actually see this is live, because if I change the JSON, re-import it, recreate the objects, now I'm getting the modified text. The next thing I want to cover is a bit of a security-focused enhancements we have done to FireDuck. The idea, of course, is not to make applications magically secure. To have a secure application, you need to apply best practices. You need to follow a lot of good approaches in development. There's no shortcut to it. But FireDuck is providing in 12.0 some options that can help improve an application security. Primarily trying to disable side effects in SQL execution and make it more difficult to inject something nasty into your SQL code. This is done through a security options property, which has the ability to restrict the SQL operations a query can perform. For example, a query can only do select, cannot do insert or updates. This allows having multiple commands chained in a single SQL execute operation. That depends on the underlying database. If the database supports it, we are exposing the feature. Preventing the ability to change the SQL of a SQL query at runtime, and making sure that an insert or update only affects one record and fail if it ends up updating more than one record. In general terms, in the data space, we have also added improvements to JSON streaming. We did some of them because of the JSON mapping wizard. We've added a brand new feature in FireDuck, which is support for query by example. Query by example is a very powerful way that lets use data-aware UI controls that, rather than displaying data or being an input mechanism for your users, they allow your user to specify filters like more than 10, or it should be like this name, and so forth. You can just type your rules into the UI controls, and FireDuck will create matching SQL statements for you. We've added IB Lite and IB2Go for a simulator, improved a number of small things in the system, and moved the SQLite version we support to an updated release. Notice though that SQLite 3.42 does not support the old FireEye encryption. If you want to use FireEye encryption, you need to rely on the old version of SQLite, which is also available. Third option, we support SQLite EE, which is the paid encrypted version of SQLite. Of course, before going through paid for SQLite with encryption, we recommend you have a look to IB2Go, which not only is available freely on mobile if you're an enterprise, but it has a yearly subscription to deploy on all platforms, which is at a price point similar to the SQLite encryption. Now, one small thing we've done on RAD server is enable a feature called squids. Squids are a version of IDs that are based on a sequence of letters rather than something that might end up being a specific element in the database structure. For example, by default, if you don't customize anything and you display a customer table, you end up with URLs or REST endpoints like customer slash and then the physical customer ID into the database. It's much better to abstract that into symbolic representation. And we've done it in a way that is almost a standard, so it could work across programming languages. But we've done it in a way that you have the client code that understands how to transform this ID into the URL, into the squid, and at the server side, the ability to intercept the squid and transform it back into the parameter that needs to be passed to your query. Couple of more things on HTTP REST. We have done a lot of smaller change, nothing huge, but a lot of very small significant change. What I want to point out too is curl support. We had it on Linux because that is the standard platform way to do HTTP client requests. Now you can use curl for the HTTP client library also on Windows and macOS. Finally, on RAD server, beside the squids, we have improved the performance by embedding FastMM5. That's part of the RAD server implementation itself, not something you can use directly without an extra license. Paging, flexibility, and session authentication improvements. That is a lot we've done in the libraries, but that's not everything. We've also done a few changes in the Delphi language and in the core runtime library. First, let me recap the platforms that we support in Delphi. Support Android 14 down to 10, iOS 16 and 17. However, at this point in time, there's no debugging support on iOS 17 device. You can bypass it by using the simulator as target. Support from macOS Sonoma, Windows 11 up to the latest versions, and several other older versions of Windows and Windows Server and Linux platforms. Now, what we've done in Delphi as a language is we've extended string literals, so they're not limited to 255 characters anymore. You can have a very long string, and that's going to work fine. But more relevant, we have introduced the concept of multi-line string literal. So you can have a single string literal without having to do quote plus and then a new quote in the new line. You can just start a string literal with a triple quote, then copy in a portion of text, JSON, SQL, XML, or anything you want, and then close it with a matching triple quotes. This is very handy because in the past it was fairly annoying to copy and paste text into a string hard-coded in the language. There is a new text block compiler directive that can even allow you to control the line breaks. So whether each of those lines are separated by carriage return line feed, only one of them, or whatever is native to the platform you are compiling to. So your string on Windows would have a different termination for each line than the same string compiled for macOS. One way to see the effect of the text block directive for multi-line strings is to read the length of the actual string that is being created in memory. When you're using carriage return and line feed, which is the default on Windows, you get more elements in your string than if you're using only coverage return. The string is the same, but the difference in the new line management causes a difference in the length of the string itself. Linux. A few more things we've done to the Delphi language. One, we've introduced for the first time the concept of a weak type alias, and that is done for native int. So native int used to be a separate type that was floating, so it was behaving differently on 32-bit and 64-bit platforms. Now native int keeps behaving the same, but it's weak alias, meaning you cannot separate it as a way to overload a data type. You cannot overload a function with int and native int because native int is not a fully distinguished type from integer. It is a change that might cause a little bit of trouble if you have existing applications that were mixing native int, integer, and int64, but it's going to help having cleaner code on 32-bit, 64-bit platforms, and also it helped us clean up the RTL support for Win64. In addition, we have improved not a number comparison following the rules of IEEE, and improved warning for generic classes which were not matching the non-generic counterpart in the past. Small last thing, but quite handy, we are introducing a new feature to generate a file with all of the unit dependency, whether it's interface-based unit dependency, which are depicted here with the strong line, or an implementation-based unit dependency, which are depicted with the dash line. So the idea is you add this flag into your compilation, you get a file. What you can do with that file? It's a graph width file, so you can use a tool to generate the user interface like here. It can get very complicated for a large application, of course, but given it's a file with text, very simple to parse, you can also build extra tooling on top of it to simply figure out what might be wrong in your application architecture. And specifically, the goal is help people find circular unit references which are causing a lot of strain on the compiler in terms of compilation performance, which reflects also in the code completion side of things. The recommendation is to try to identify circular unit references and try to remove them when possible to have a cleaner architecture and also to have a faster. Very relevant is the support for Android API level 33. This has been required since a few months ago for Google Store and is becoming fully required this month, November. We are providing the full support of the API and a number of changes to improve how FireMonkey applications adapt to Android for the latest versions of the operating system, and its improved security model, its improved storage model, and change to users permissions, and so forth. So there are a number of changes for the Android platform, fairly extensive, that go beyond merely supporting the API level, but goes into improving the integration with the most recent versions of the Android operating system. We've also done something new on the Windows platform. Microsoft has finally provided metadata for the entire Windows API. It used to be that the only interface to the Windows API was header files, C language header files, that you could parse to generate the matching Delphi source code. But they did require a lot of manual tweaking, manual change. They were not clean at the source and consistent, so it was always difficult for us to have a complete mapping of the Windows API. Now with this metadata, we have modified one internal tool and we use it to generate Pascal files for the entire Windows API. What we're generating is 300 units. It's 41 megabytes of Delphi source code, and that's headers only. It's declarations only. That gives you the size and the relevance of this change. We are expecting to have really the entire classic Windows API available, and notice this is called Win32, but it works both on 32-bit and 64-bit. It's available in Get because it's a huge download and not everyone is going to need it, so we decided to go for a separate download. At the same time, we've refreshed the WinRT API to a more recent version than what we had in RAD Studio 11, and the API behind the WebView 2 control, which has also been extended with a number of settings that are made available at the T-Edge browser level in VCL. And some of them are also available to the T-Web browser control in FireMonkey. More features becoming available in WebView 2, and we are exposing those features in new versions of our product for T-Edge browser. Another big change is to floating point exceptions. We are disabling floating point exceptions on all platforms. This used to be a sort of mismatch between platforms other than Windows, but at times even on Windows, and what the Delphi RTL used to require and expect. You had to disable the floating point model every time you are calling given portions of the Windows API, or a lot of time when we're interacting with macOS or Linux. So we have decided to completely change the floating point exception model. This is a big change. We know it has potential ramifications on your code, because you might be expect an exception that's not being triggered anymore. You can restore the old behavior calling system.math setExceptionMath. If you want to keep the old behavior, you can do it. We recommend trying to move to the new model. That's all we've done in terms of features and improvements in the product, and you see it's a lot. It's really a huge release, and we've also done a lot in terms of quality that probably doesn't show fully in this slides deck, but what I wanted to highlight here is the areas where we've done quality. It's almost everywhere, but in RAD Studio 12 we're really providing a large number of fixes. We have addressed with a fix over 1,000 issues reported by customers on Quality Portal, whether it's bug reports or feature requests. Including internal reports, we are almost close to 2,000 issues fixed. This doesn't include duplicates or issues that no longer apply. So if you take the overall number of Quality Portal issues we are thinking we should be able to close in the next few days, that's over 1,200 issues reported by customers that we have resolved with a fix or with some other resolutions, including duplicates or including issues that no longer apply because we have implemented the same feature differently. There are a lot of new features in RAD Studio 12. There are game changers in terms of C++, FireMonkey, and other areas. But there is also a lot of focus on quality, because we know quality matters to our customers, and we've put a lot of time and effort into providing a quality release.
Okay, so that is the end of the presentation, and we should be having people joining us live now, including me, and I'm here. Hello. I'm just going to wait for the others to join. There they are. Caught us by surprise. We're all busy answering questions, so we're like, oh wait, the video stopped. I think there's Kyle as well. Excellent. Nuno is there. Would just who would like to take over from here? Kyle, would you?
Yeah, I'll just give a quick intro here in the Q&A. Obviously, thanks to everyone that's participated both in presenting and the questions that we've received so far. There are quite a few. If there's something that you want to bring up to the audience, this is going to be the time here. I'll let Ian kind of drive through how we want to handle that. If we want to just take text-based questions in the chat, and then we'll answer those live. If there's something that either is not answered today or that's pressing for you, we do have a list here, and we'll leave this up during the Q&A period for you to send follow-up emails to anyone that's been on the panel today, myself included, and yeah, we'll answer those directly. And also, if it's not a question, it's something that feedback, we're happy to hear. We've seen a lot of those questions or comments in the chat, and really just enthused by the audience participation here. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Ian to kind of moderate us through.
Yeah, and we have been overwhelmed with success. It's one of those things where we literally are victims of our success today. So A few people have said about audio and things like that. That happens with GoToWebinar. We're looking at alternative platforms going forward. So if you had a few issues, we're sorry about that. You know, these things happen. Technology, it's unfortunately not under our control. It's just the way these things go. But one good thing is,
sorry, I will just say based on the interest and the excitement here, we will offer a follow-up to this. It might not be the same format. It might be another platform, as Ian mentioned, but we want to give an opportunity for more Q&A and more, obviously, audience participation in this. So look forward to something like that to come in the next few weeks. And we will also be sending out recordings of this. If there were audio issues on your end at the time of viewing, hopefully those are remedied in the follow-up recordings. So yeah, I'll stop.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that, you know, technology gets in the way sometimes. The good news is a lot of positive feedback, lots of people saying how much they like the presentation. We've discovered that assigning questions to people to answer specifically is a little bit of a problem when they've got Macs. So much for Macs, it just works. Apparently Windows works a little bit better for this. So I'm quite pleased about that as a Windows fanboy. Okay, so let's just go through some of the important questions. A lot of people saying hi from various places, Winnipeg in Canada. And someone saying they're on the Arctic Circle, Jacko Saliminius. So we did joke a few times about the kind of areas that people will come from. So, you know, sorry if we don't say hi to everybody in every country, but there are a lot of you around, many thousands. Okay, let's pick on a couple of questions. Marco, were there a couple of questions that you wanted to particularly deal with? Because there are a lot of questions about Skia and compatibility and things like that.
Yeah, I can make a couple of things. First, I saw a lot of questions about existence co-installing of 11x, well, 11.3 most likely, and 12. So by design, you can install 12 on the same machine. You have 11.3. Everything would work, with the exception of a couple of the Get-It plugins. We are seeing some issues that we are addressing. The good thing that Get-It plugins can be replaced without reinstalling everything. We can change them on the Get-It server. But outside of this, which is a very specific issue, both the existing license, if you have an active subscription, and will work, the old version will continue to work. At times, we tend to recommend people use VMs and other mechanisms, but you can install 12 on the same machine where you have 11.3. That's in general. So that's one of the general things I wanted to mention. The other, getting to your specific question, which is Skia. Yeah, I mean, it's we haven't devoted a lot of time to Skia. It is a powerful technology. We can do an hour, probably 2 hours, even 3 hours on Skia. It's a huge library. Even if there is a demo that is available, the demo is available for both FireMonkey and VCL, because again, Skia is available for both FireMonkey and VCL. It shows all of the controls, a number of scenarios. It is an extremely powerful library. We are embedding as a first-class citizen in FireMonkey, but it's also a great solution for VCL. VCL does not come out of the box, or did not come out of the box with a component for SVG. It didn't come out of the box with a component for animated images, and now it has those. But the ability to have a Skia drawing surface and paint on it is great. VCL has an option very few people are aware of, which is using DirectX, painting directly rather than GDI. But now we're also adding Skia rendering on top of it, which is extremely powerful. So Skia is great for FireMonkey. It's a new foundation for FireMonkey as the default renderer, but it's also great for VCL, and it's not only available for Delphi, it's available for C++ for both VCL and FireMonkey. So it was quite an effort to do a nice and smooth integration. We are providing extra features on top of the open source version of Skia for Delphi. for example, the PDF printing, the Vulkan driver, and others are add-ons to what you could use in 11.3 through the Skia open source project integration, Skia for Delphi.
Yeah, and Vulkan's a big thing about that as well. We did have someone say before about, oh, so have you just bolted in the the third-party library and that's it, that's the upgrade? And I did answer that on a different webinar where I said, actually, it's way more fundamental than that. Things like the icon editor and a couple of other things as well, they are baked into the IDE. This is more than just, you know, taking the third-party library and making it work. It is much more work than that. As you said, the guys that work on that project are actually, you know, help to integrate it as well. So the Skia library, you know, Jim and I, when we presented before, when Jim was doing this job, very big fans of it. It's a massive, for me as a Delphi developer anyway, and it applies to C++ as well, it's a massive injection of functionality that really does, you know, add some almost free capabilities to your app development as well. So, you know, playing animations and all those kind of things were a lot harder before you integrated Skia. So yeah, it's a great thing. So we wanted to cover that. Stephen Ball has had to disappear off, but there was a question about SQLite encryption. I just want to cover that. I'll cover that on his behalf. They said, would RAD Studio 12 deal with the encryption? The answer is that actually there's a better option, which is Interbase, which is what Stephen said. The encryption is included with Interbase, and Interbase to Go is included for the mobile and enterprise platform. This is Stephen's answer. So zero cost and a more feature complete database. You know, that's his answer.
Yeah, and
you can also,
yeah, no, and
sorry.
the side thing that, yeah, I mean, SQLite, the official version of SQLite has dropped support of something that was kind of a backdoor that FireMonkey used for encryption. Now it's not available anymore. As I was mentioning, there is a version with encryption, but that's not a free version. It's a paid version of SQLite. And that's an option, but of course, there is also the option to use IB2Go, which is a way more powerful database. The encryption support is extremely more flexible. You can encrypt by table, by column, not like all or nothing. And on top of it, yes, it is possible to deploy freely mobile application with Interbase2Go, but now there is a new offer that's been available for a month or two, which is the ability to buy a subscription to deploy Interbase2Go on all platforms in an unlimited number of application instances. I mean, as many applications, as many copies of that application as you want, and the cost is about $2,000 a year. So it's a very competitive price for a high quality encrypted database you can go have available on mobile, Windows, Mac OS, for your application.
Yeah, and the question to think about there is, what are you using the SQLite for? Is if you are writing an app to specifically read SQLite databases, then that's a very specific use case for having to read and write SQLite. But if all you're doing is using that database as some form of embedded database for a mobile app or something like that, or even, you know, something that will then seamlessly scale up to a server, then why not use Interbase? Because, you know, SQLite has got its own restrictions anyway. Interbase got all sorts of award-winning technology behind it. So that's our little Embarcadero plug there aside there for Interbase. Okay, lots of questions for. Someone asked about C data. Just to say here, Marco, do you want to answer that? They were saying that, you know, what's happened to C data. It's worth explaining.
Yeah, I agree. So we had an agreement with C data. We did a joint offer. They built a FireMonkey version of the drivers that we partially made available to our higher end SKUs and partially were available as a further add-on directly for CData. They took a business decision to drop the support, the entire support for FireDuck. So it's not that we stopped the bundling, is that the product has been discontinued by CData. We are not happy about the decision, but there's really nothing we can do. It's their product at the end of the day. So how can you continue providing the same capabilities? There are basically two options. One is keep using CData through the ODBC driver. FireDuck via ODBC can still connect to those drivers. This is a possibility. The licensing, though, is their licensing, which I think is less favorable than the one that was offered through FireDuck. But again, it is a different company, a different business. There's really not much we can do there. The other option is for the services that we're offering that are based on web services is, for example, to use the REST client library or some other Delphi client library to invoke web services and offer and integrate with those. There is one small advantage in doing it. I mean, there is a disadvantage. You have to rewrite a significant amount of code, but there is an advantage that because that is Delphi code, it can run on all platforms, unlike the CData drivers, which were Windows specific.
Yeah. This is a question for David, which you've answered, but I'll ask it anyway. And in fact, a few people asked this question, and I did answer them, but I'll let David answer it as well. Is the new Visual Assist, if I conglomerate these questions together, I think, is the new Visual Assist going to be available for Delphi? I had about 5 people ask that. And is the new control click menu that was added as part of Visual Assist, is that going to be available in Delphi as well?
I certainly saw a lot of questions about that, and I was even answering some just a minute before you asked. Look, we love Visual Assist. Certainly a lot of interest in having it for Delphi. Right now we're focusing on C++ because it's currently a C++ tool. But yeah, definitely thinking about what we can do for Delphi. It would be extremely valuable for Delphi. So I don't have plans we can share right now. I can't sort of answer with a specific plan, but we certainly understand the interest, and I think you should email us.
Yeah, a lot of love from people about Visual Assist as well. Many people saying, "Wow, this is really cool," and all the rest of it. One other question about Visual Assist: does Visual Assist create any directories under my project directory? You know, additional stuff to manage?
No, it doesn't, which is excellent. So the background for that question is that cQuery, which is the old C++ LSP, which still exists in 12, by the way, and you can turn it on. Does put a bunch of folders with various files and caches under your project folder, which could cause problems for various reasons. Visual Assist does not do that. It keeps its content in the app data folder. It's nicely isolated, keeps your project clean.
Yeah, and Thomas Hansen, who's actually gone now, but he said, "Oh no, can I disable these control click submenus, or at least make it optional?"
Yes, I saw that, which I think was referring to go to definition, because the person in question really liked having control click go to definition. And what I can answer there is that when the menu pops up, it includes go to definition as the very top option. We thought making control click show all of the amazing things that GoTo related could do was worthwhile, but we definitely have not lost go to definition. That's included there in that menu.
Yeah, there were some questions from Nuno as well. Let me just grab that, put Nuno on the spot. Sorry, I've got a very, very big long list of questions, which is why I look like I'm searching like I'm completely blind, but there's an awful lot of them there. Nuno, yeah, so Nuno, this is a question from Tomas. He said, can you, with the icon creator, can you make 9 patch images for Android with the new icon generator? Which is a question someone else asked as well.
No, you cannot make 10 patch images at the moment, only the Android adaptive icon, but we'll definitely look into it in the future. So we will have news in the future.
Yeah.
And it's important to notice that beside the icon generator, which is an astonishing great feature, I love it. I mean, I've added icons for application, spending hours on all of the various sizes, but we're also supporting adaptive icon, which is the new icon format for Android. So it's a single icon, well, that, as the name implies, very fantastic name, adaptive icon, that adapts to the pixels that it has to display onto. So it's like kind of an SVG based icon, but it's a specific format for Android that we added support for out of the box.
Yeah, and in fact, a related question, which I'll answer as well, which was, can the icons have a transparent background? Nuno, I think you answered that by saying something about a tint option, and if you choose none, then it should be transparent. Is that right?
Yeah, if it is supported by the platform, yes. Otherwise, it will go to the default.
It will go to, okay, right. So the default background color, otherwise, yeah. Okay. Let me see. We've got so many. It's ridiculous. You asked about coexisting, amazing features. I mean, there's just quite a lot of these, and people saying, you know, this is very cool, and there's a lot happening, and all the rest of it. This is a question. I'm not sure who would want to answer this. Actually, this might be a good one for Carl to answer, which is if I have a Delphi 11 license, is it still valid after installing Delphi 12? So it's kind of a licensing question. I think we know the answer, but
yeah, so you should be able to go back and forth between the versions as long as you have an active subscription with us. So yeah, and if you have issues with that, yeah, feel free to reach out to our support and licensing team. But that functionality should work for you without issue. There was a related question on if you are editing a C++ project, will it compile in 11.3? So again, using simultaneous multiple versions there. That one's focused on C++. David, any thoughts on that?
Look, on the source code side, I mean, the compilers that we're shipping certainly are compatible with 11.3. So if you write source code in 12, it should compile with 11.3. Look, we never officially support going backwards. You know, the main thing are the project files, for example. When you open an old project file in the new version, it is upgraded. Look, we would normally just recommend running 2 project files there, you know, one for each version. Off the top of my head, I can't recall any major changes going from 11.3 to 12 in the project files, but it's not recommended, and I don't want to suggest you do it. Source code wise, you know, if you write C++ in version 12, it certainly should compile in version 11.3 as well.
Yeah, depending on the version of C++, of course. If you're using like C++ 15 or something like that, there's differences. So
well, on that note, sorry, I shouldn't interrupt, but if you're using the new preview toolchain, of course, it's a different matter. Because the preview is awesome, and one of the awesome things is that it supports more. So it is definitely possible to write C++ code with our new shiny toolchain that's in preview that won't work using the old version, which is fantastic. That's kind of the point. Yeah, I mean, by all means, give that a go because it's actually quite cool to see.
Yeah, and a lot of people ask about modern C++, you know, being a target as well, and that's the whole point of the CLang preview, is to be able to actually target those kind of more modern, what's the word I'm looking for? Not dialect, but standard. Yes, C++ standard. Okay, and a related question, which I'll answer, which is if someone has a project they want to do in 11.3, but they don't have a version of Delphi yet, which is good. That means they're going to be a new customer, so that's always nice. And they said if they bought 12 now, would they be able to install 11.3? The answer is yes. If you buy a new version now, particularly if you have many versions out of date, you know, I know there are people out there still using Delphi 7, struggling away against modernity. They don't want to have anything cool and deadly like new code working. Oh no! But if they go and they buy RAD Studio 12 or whatever, Delphi 12 or C++ 12, you will get a license to the most recent versions, not all of them, because there's a limit to how far we can go back. But yes, you would definitely get RAD Studio 12 and be able to have access then to download RAD Studio 11.3. And so if you are saying, I want to buy a new version, but there's only 12 available, that's okay. Go ahead, buy it, and you will be able to download the early version if that's a version that you're kind of restricted to in terms of targeting. I think the specific, I didn't see the person's question, but the specific scenario they had was they had some third-party libraries that are not quite ready yet for 12. And so they wanted to create this new project using 11.3. And then when the third-party libraries are ready, they would then migrate from 11.3 to 12. And another person from Gianluca is asking about migrating projects from 10.3 to Delphi 12. Yes, of course. I mean, that's one of the strongest benefits of Delphi in particular, is that it is so backwardly compatible. You can use very old code and mostly get away with it. Not everything will work, but if you're not using new features, then that code is going to be able to go backwards and forwards. Once you start to use newer features, especially things like generics and new language features like multi-line literals and all those kind of things, then obviously you can't go back to the older versions. But you can definitely take older code and use it. I do it all the time. I mean, I always want to be using the most recent compiler I can get away with. So yes, you can go back and do that. Question from Marco. Enable immersive dark mode. Does that make the VCO use the dark style of Windows without using custom styles theme? This is a very good question.
Yeah, if you enable immersive dark mode, it's just a Windows API call behind the scenes we're doing. And what happens if you're on Windows 11, it will display and paint the non-client area, so the caption, the borders, and the like, with the new dark mode. It is your responsibility to have a similar dark content for the controls and the UI and the elements in the form itself. Now, in theory, you could also bundle it with the undocumented Explorer Dark, whatever it's called, dark theme. And that should fix the common controls. To my experience, it doesn't really work that well. And again, it's an undocumented feature for Windows. So immersive dark mode takes care of the border and the non-client area without using VCL styles. You would have to take care directly of the content, so the client area. Of course, if using VCL styles, the content can be handled easily for you.
Yeah, that's good. And if you've got maintenance subscription, you might be getting some new styles in the future as well. So watch out. It's one of the good reasons to get your maintenance contract. When is the Delphi 12 community? Oh, yes, I should have asked this question probably earlier on. Which one of you would like to answer this question? Because I know you all know the answer to this. When is the Delphi 12 community edition expected to become available? We've only just released RAD Studio 12, and they all want to have a community edition now. Nobody wants to answer? Yeah, I can answer.
There is no answer. Sure. No information we can share.
Exactly.
There's going to be a community edition, but if you feel this product is valuable for you and for what you're doing, you might want to consider to buy a license.
Yeah, our primary focus right now is, there's a lot we've done in this release, but we are focused on, well, what does 12.1 look like, and what can we do in that version? Once we get that behind us, then we'll reevaluate where community sits within our release cycle, because it does take away from those that are delivering the next version of RAD Studio in their time. So we want to be cognizant of that and deliver to our customers, but certainly not at the cost of our community. So yeah, but there's always the free trial available. So if you are not a current paying customer, there are trials that are available for download today that you can go and try it out for 30 days and and take a look.
Yeah, and we recognise that the community edition as well is very useful for educating people. And I had a couple of questions about education as well. It is something we're looking into because obviously we want people to be teaching Delphi as a program language, and C++ that's pretty much covered in universities, but Delphi not so much. In Brazil, for example, there is a huge community of Delphi developers, and a lot of that is as a result of it being adopted in university. There's a new initiative in Germany where they're trying to get that into various universities as well. And I'm personally involved in this, so I'm very keen as well. So if you are an educator out there and you've got some ties into educating people into programming languages, please contact us and specifically email me if you want to as well, because it is something we're looking into. The community edition does play into that because it's a big part of it. However, we also have some schemes for educational programs and things like that, and we will work with educators. I'm sure Kyle would confirm that as well. But we are very keen to make sure that people learn Delphi and using RAD Studio as a programming language early on, so that they can see the benefits and then take that knowledge of the benefits into their new workplaces and have a community of people there. People say, oh, there are no Delphi developers, and then you say, oh, I can't find Delphi developers. Those two things they cannot be the same truth. There are people out there, but education is important to make sure that we're feeding into producing more and more Delphi people who appreciate what RAD Studio can do for you. It's a great product. I believe in it. That's why I'm doing this job. I'm not, some kind of shill for the company. Okay, so are there any other questions you guys would like to cover? We've covered quite a lot of them, I think.
We have hundreds actually, and it's hard to run through. I mean, yeah. I saw Kyle asked people, and I might just repeat this verbally, to if your question hasn't been answered during the webinar in text, to post it again. But Ian, there are a whole bunch that I think are probably worth answering, even if we answered in text, just because there are so many.
Sure. Do you want to pick some? There's some that have not been answered, and I'm scrolling down to those.
Right, sure. Look, there's one I just answered about C++ Builder and COF, and questions about calling DLLs, yes, for example. So the benefit of COF and PDB is that it's effectively a Windows platform standard. Now, this is about hand wavy because Windows has no standards, but it's the effective standard. And so a lot of the existing tooling around there that understands COF format object files and PDB format debug info and that kind of thing. So there are huge benefits there because it sort of opens up the ability to use many other tools and utilities and analyses and that kind of thing with with apps built in C++ Builder. In terms of calling a DLL, the answer is a little complex, and I would say maybe. For example, if you have a import library, you won't have to convert that from COF to OMF, or sorry, COF to ELF. You'd be able to use the import library, and if it's a plain C DLL, then sure. If it's a C++ DLL, then we aren't aiming at visual C++ ABI compatibility because there is no standardized C++ ABI, and we're using a different STL that has a different layout in memory and that kind of thing. But that's the case you get with any compiler. There are multiple C++ compilers for Windows, and none of them offer this for very good technical reasons. However, we are, of course, aiming at very high recompiling compatibility. So if you happen to have a C++ DLL, just rebuild it with the new toolchain, then use it. That's the goal. So slightly complex answer there. The main benefits are in additional tooling, slightly easier with DLLs, and C++ is the same story as for every toolchain, except that we hope you'll find the new toolchain of ours very easy to use.
Yeah, and on a slightly more fun note, someone said, wasn't it Ian who designed a Star Trek panel? Actually, we called it a space computer because, Paramount have got a very big bunch of lawyers who come up and tell you off if you say Star Trek too often. Was I the one that designed the space computer using Skia? Yes, it was. I also used in a recent update some third-party components from Apercept, which allowed you to link to AWS. And one of the things you could link from there was AWS Poly, which is a speech generation thing. So not only did the Star Trek computer do all sorts of animations and things like that, you could entirely using Skia with almost zero code to do things like custom fonts, even a Klingon font, with very few lines of code in Delphi. But also now the space computer can speak, so it can say things like, there are Klingons on the starboard bow, or whatever these things are. That's the power of Skia. It adds a dimension. But yes, I am a fanboy of Skia, and I'll keep doing demos like that because it's cool. Right, Marco, have you got some questions you would like to address?
I don't know. I kind of lost track a bit of the questions.
Yeah, me too.
That's why I'm asking you. So many.
Yeah. I think the most of the questions.
One thing I wanted to clarify, there was a question that was very specific about macOS and support for older versions of macOS. The thing I want to clarify is that when we tend to support only a number of recent versions of operating systems, specifically in the mobile space where things are moving very, very fast. But if we do not offer official support of an old version, it doesn't mean that an application is not going to work there. Most likely it's going to work. Now, there is a chance, specifically if you're calling a new API, that something gets broken in an old version, but nothing that we are aware of or that we are intentionally changing to break support. That is even true, for example, on Windows for Windows XP. We do have a lot of features beyond XP, but they're all, or they should all be protected in a dynamic way. So if you're using those features will not work, but the application will not stop completely from running under XP. And same we are doing for other platforms. Now, there is a chance that we are using or calling an API that makes an application not compatible with older versions. So it's always a possibility, but it's not that the lack of support for another platform means we know nothing works there. It's only we don't guarantee that everything works there.
Yeah. And talking of things working, someone asked, have most, and I'll answer this question because it kind of pertains to what I do, have most of your VCL component partners updated their products for 12, and can we install 12 over 11 and preserve our settings? Okay, so two-part question there. The first question is, have most of the component partners updated their products for 12? The answer is it's a little bit hit and miss because not everybody does that immediately. I'm sure they have their own demands on the resources as well. I do know most of the bigger vendors because I actually deal with the tech partners and the MVPs as part of my role. Most of the bigger vendors like TMS and people like that are working very, very hard. Most of their libraries are converted, and we actually allow the tech partners very early access to the betas so that they know what's coming and can then help deal with any possible incompatibilities or use some new features of their libraries. So most of them, yes. I would recommend that you approach the vendors directly and ask them if they don't have a specific announcement about it. But usually within a month, most of those people have got updated and say so on their respective blogs. Second part we've already dealt with. Can we install 12 over 11 and preserve our settings? Actually, 12 doesn't really install over 11. It installs side by side with 11. So your 11 settings should be preserved. You should always back up your settings using the migration wizard anyway. And one thing to watch for that is a bit of a gotcha with not just our product, but all sorts of products. Some people store things in my documents folder on the C drive. And on some people's systems, that drive is virtualized to OneDrive, which is great if you're only using one computer. But if you have RAD Studio installed on two computers and those two share your OneDrive and they've got different versions of RAD Studio on the computer and you're storing things like third-party components in a specific folder, on that OneDrive thing, that's when you get most of your weird incompatibilities. It's nothing to do with Embarcadero. It's just the way that Windows tries to be helpful, and in doing its helpful thing causes a problem. So just be really careful about things like OneDrive on My Documents, because they can be an issue. But apart from that, you can install them side by side. I've got 4 versions installed on my machine, all working absolutely fine, and I have all sorts of betas I've installed in the past as well. Okay.
So just a note on that, Ian. So yes, all major versions can be installed side by side. You can't have, let's say, 11.0 and 11.1, but you can have 11 and 12. Right now, though, we have a issue with a couple of plugins in Getit, where installing them in version 12 will cause an issue for 11.3. That's an issue we think we've isolated the cause, and we'll fix it very soon. So that's just something to be aware of in the next, I don't know, couple of days with a couple of Getit plugins. But yeah, you can install 12 on a machine which has 11. Yeah,
and it'll work fine. Like I say, just be careful of that OneDrive thing, because it's bitten me a few times, and I don't know. Microsoft need to look into that, because I'm sure I'm not the only one that spent hours cursing at the screen. Why have you done this? It's a problem. Okay, so regarding, and this is a question for David, regarding the new working process C++ toolchain stuff, will that eventually be applied for Win32 as well as, will that be applied for Win32 eventually as well as Win64 or not? I can't remember whether you answered this question previously.
I haven't answered it yet, but it's an excellent question. So yeah, we're going for Win64 first, simply because it's a 64-bit era these days, and Win32 is less valuable. So it's a very good question, which we don't have something we can announce for yet, which platform we'll go for afterwards. We want to get our new toolchain out for Win64. There are a couple of things we could do. We could go for ARM64 on Windows, since ARM is growing, or we could go for Win32 on Windows, which would provide a nice upgrade path from Classic. And we do encourage you to move away from Classic to Clang, and we know having that would help. We could even use the new toolchain as for other platforms completely. It's a very modern toolchain, and will be a great foundation. You can tell I'm not answering the question, and that's because we actually don't have something we can announce yet. What I can say is that look, we're thinking about this very carefully. We'd really like your input on what you need.
Yeah, and I want to speak to the not answering questions directly sometimes, because it does come up and people seem to think that it was some kind of secretive black shadow organization, and actually that's not the case. I mean, I have tried to be, when I took over the role as a developer relations, I wanted to make it a slightly different. Jim McKeith and I are very similar people, but we differ in some fairly significant ways about how we approach things. And as developer advocate, I want you to get in touch with me if there's something you want to know about, because it's my job to be the bridge between the outside world and the company, so that I can translate it, if necessary, into, hey, this is what we meant when we said X or Y, or make sure it goes to the right people without 70,000 emails a day going to someone like Marco or David or Nuno or Carl. So that's one thing. I want you to contact me directly. I put my email up all the time. I really mean it. It's on the screen now. Feel free to email me and I will respond. If I get too many emails a day, then I might take a doubt. But generally, people find me very responsive. So that's one thing. I want us to be approachable. If you feel like some way not approachable, that is not the case. Secondly, the reason we don't discuss features that we are looking into is actually more complicated than just saying, no, we're not going to tell you. It's actually due to legal requirements, and also behind the scenes, there's lots of things like clearance for things like patents and open source licenses, and we have a legal department to make sure that we've got agreements in place that we don't suddenly include some feature that is actually someone else's feature and we haven't yet signed up an agreement with them. Or we don't know for certain it's going to work. And as a public company, when we go ahead and say we're definitely going to do this feature by November the 17th and it'll be ready at 10 a.m., we can get sued for that. And there's only so many times you can get away with being sued and still operate as a company. So it's not about us being secretive. It's about us having to be careful what we say for many reasons. But it's not because we don't want to tell people what's going on. So I just want to emphasize that.
Sorry to go back from that, Ian, but there was a related question to the one that you just asked me, which is about directions, and I think it might be more for Marco first. Actually, he was asking about ARM for Windows. So sorry, just to seg back from what you were saying, but I answered for C++, but Delphi, sorry, Marco, I think people are very interested in Delphi as well for ARM.
Sure, it is a platform under consideration, of course. Microsoft has made multiple attempts to push ARM and has been discussing ARM is going to be a great thing next year for the last 10 years. But I personally have the impression that this time they are a bit more serious, specifically because they have a lot of pressure from the Apple side of the world that pushed a quick 2 years transition of everyone from Intel to ARM. So it is a platform that we are considering. It is fairly straightforward to run existing Intel application, both 32-bit and 64-bit on ARM64 hardware for Windows. But of course, if that platform becomes more popular, we would like to be able to target it natively, as we're doing already for macOS. And so that is a platform that's actively under consideration by the company.
Yeah. Okay. So here's a question for Marco. Can't remember whether you answered this already. Is there backward compatibility for the new native int for the old integer property declaration in Windows 64? Maybe some kind of directive.
Yeah, but native int is not strictly new. I mean, native int has been around since the 64-bit compiler XC2, if I remember. The difference is that native int was considered as a separate type, although it was the same length of either integer or int64. Now native int is not considered a separate type, but it is still the same length of integer and int64. The only case this really makes a difference is when you have overloaded function. And I was showing a very small snippet of code doing that, because overloading on, for example, integer and native int does not make sense on Win32. It does make sense on Win64, but it's a bit of a misnomer, because if you want to overload on integer different sizes, you should overload on integer and int64. The alternative is just use native int, which floats and moves to 32-bit to 64-bit. So we really, if there is something in your code that's not compatible, I really think it's worth cleaning it up, because there should not be any need of overload on a fixed and floating type, because otherwise our application will work on perfectly on one of the two scenarios, but not the other. For example, in the past, in those scenarios, you would get ambiguous call in the calls of some of those functions, but it was at the call time. But actually, the real problem is, no, there's something wrong in the declaration, not in the call. And of course, you can force the call by casting the type, but that's not the solution. Solution is try to have cleaner code that migrates better from 32-bit to 64-bit. We have also took the opportunity to clean up a lot of the existing issues that were in the RTL, smaller in cases, and really used native int in every place where native int makes sense. We kept integer in some, because at times you don't need really to have data structure with 4 billion entries of big things, because that, if it doesn't exceed memory, it kind of exceeds what is logical and meaningful to do. And of course, moving all pointers to longer pointers requires extra memory. So there is a downside in forcing a longer pointer or a bigger memory structure.
Sorry, I muted myself because I was coughing a little bit, and also I'm getting some pings come through with some questions as well. I'm just trying to find out. There were some good questions for Nuno, but let me just find where they've gone because my stupid list.
While you're taking a look on that, I'll just add a couple thoughts here. Excuse me. I think the cough is contagious, even virtually. So there's been quite a few questions, obviously, asked around different platform targets that you want us to support. The only way that we know, obviously, we have our indication of what our existing customers are using, where the markets are going, but to really have your voices heard, the best way to get that in front of us in terms of a new platform that you want us to target or something you want us to revisit support for in a future version is to reach out to us. And so that's going to be either through the quality portal, rather, submitting a request yourself or upvoting an existing one, or reaching out to us directly here. We are expecting, as this release is showing, this has been a foundational move for us in a lot of areas, specifically around C++ and in moving that forward. And with that comes a little bit of ease and less friction on where we go next. And so right now we are listening. Our ears are open to understanding where you want us to go and what direction we should take. So with that, please email us. You have our email addresses here, or submit tickets into the quality portal as well. So, but we'd love to have a conversation with you, especially if it's something that we haven't gone in a direction we haven't gone before. Really understanding your needs and why that's important to you. Certainly, you're not the only one feeling that need, and so we want to make sure we hear that and give that the right voice.
Yeah, and in fact, that's something I've tried to reinforce as well, to say, hey, we are listening. We are listening to what you say. Don't think that we just sit back and don't take any suggestions and just put them in some trash can somewhere. That's not what's happening. Sometimes it's difficult to respond to all the different places that people comment. I probably personally am involved in about 6 Telegram, I don't know, groups. Is that what you would call it? Telegram channel, and also 4 or 5 Discord groups, and I don't know how many Facebook groups. The C++ one has 15,000 people on it, and the Delphi groups, there are so many, I can't keep track of them all. We do have a Slack channel, and we also have Discourse, and we're looking to get an official Discord group as well to try and outreach. So if it sometimes seems like we're not replying, it's basically because of the sheer overwhelming number of questions we get. So we really are listening. We're listening to what you're saying. So Nuno, there's a question here. Does the icon generator, because this is kind of your main focus in the thing that we were doing, does it support, does it use PNG Crush as well to optimize the file size of the generated files based on the initial file, or only SVG supported, and for the iOS and Android platforms, because there are like unique, like a dozen unique sizes? So that was the question.
Okay, so for you to get better results, you should use an SVG, because for Android adaptive icon, for it to work with an image, you should use a SVG. However, it also works with PNGs, and it will be the size will be adjusted for better usage in all platforms. And just a quick note: if you use a PNG instead of an SVG, then when you are on the Android adaptive icon, what you can do is, or you either upload an SVG specifically for that purpose, or you can choose text, for example, and go in text on that case, and that will work with this both ways.
Yeah. Okay. And another question that we have is, I'm not sure whether.
There is one fairly relevant question I want to answer. Is what's the release date? The release date was 2 days ago. The product is released. It is available. If you are on subscription, you can go to Embarcadero.com and download it. If not, you can go to Embarcadero.com without and get a trial. So the product is available.
Get it now. It's available. Yeah, and David, is Twine compile coming for C++ Builder 12?
Yes, it should be coming very soon. Yeah, we just released very recently, as just mentioned, and yeah, various third-party things are still coming in officially, but yes, we should see that any moment. Twine compile is a fantastic addition for compiling C++ fast, by the way. Hopefully, if you use C++, you already know it, but if you don't, then it's available and get it for free. So that should be there very soon, and we recommend you download it and try it out.
It's like giving an energy drink to your C++ compiler, because all of a sudden it goes super fast. That's my understanding of it. Anyway, it's a definite speed boost. This is one from Marco. I think Delphi floating point exception changes. Will eConvert error still work for input data validation? I don't even know what the answer to that is.
Yeah, I think that's separate. Input, if you are processing a string as a float, those type of exceptions are exceptions that happen in the specific code that does the conversion and analyzes the conversion. The type of exceptions you won't get is a floating point division by 0, or floating point overflown, or floating point specific operation that caused something weird. And as I was mentioning, the reason this has been disabled because a lot of libraries in the platforms we target, even Windows, for example, DirectX, but also others that do raise exceptions, or do operations that cause exceptions at the floating point level, but the exceptions are masked, so they're not raised outside. And because we used a different model, we had to disable exceptions and re-enable them. That's very expensive computationally, and also has other drawbacks in terms of multi-threading support. So the idea is, let's follow what all of the target platforms the platform we target do, and go kind of mainstream. If you have code that requires those specific exceptions, you will have a different behavior in your application. You can change the code, or you can re-enable the exception. There is a single line to be added to the application for that. But going forward, we think it's better to be consistent with what other dev tools and library libraries on the platforms do. And so that was a relevant thing. It's a decision that was taken many years ago when Delphi 1 started, basically. And at that time, it made a lot of sense. Nowadays, it is complicated. It's very complicated on Apple platform. But again, even on Windows, it's getting more and more unusual technical architecture decision. And so we are trying to go more mainstream.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So I think we'll hand back to Kyle.
Well, I think we're getting to the time here. I really appreciate the attention here. We still have a few hundred of you all hanging out with us, and we certainly have so many questions here. As we start to wrap up here, I'm just going to rapid fire a few questions, and because I'm doing so in such a quick manner, don't think that the questions are not important. I just know that we will be here for hours answering questions. You do have our follow-up emails on the screen, and we will, like I said, do another Q&A session along with other specific webinars around different features and components here that we've discussed. So we know that this is broad and a big release, and so each of these different components and updates could have their own webinar, and will. So with that, I'm just going to rapid fire a few of these. Anyone want to take this on the speed of the new Clang compiler and linker versus what was there prior?
Sure, I can take that. Look, it's too early to say, of course, because it's still in preview, but we expect it to be very good, especially the linker.
Why is it in preview? I saw it in the chat. I'm going to tell you out.
That's a good question.
Look, I mean, we're trying to make it the best that it can be. And during development, you get to a point where you decide you're just going to crunch and release, or you're going to make sure that you deliver the best thing. And we're trying to make sure we deliver the best thing.
Yeah, so I mean, I knew the answer to this. We have many plans and much to do, but we do want to continue to deliver stable and quality. So and not just release arbitrarily. So this is a preview, and we will it will continue to improve. Let's see, AI in the IDE. Anyone want to take a stab at that? Everyone wants to talk about AI these days, but or I can answer it.
AI is lots of. Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead, please.
I have an answer to this as well, and then I'll let you answer afterwards. This is my position on AI in the IDE at the moment. Okay, right now there's a lot of different AI choices, and in fact, every time someone like an MVP comes to me, they've got another solution for AI in the IDE. And if you go in to get it at the moment, I think there are about 5 or 6 plugins that do AI in the IDE. And in fact, Marco Haza from GWK software, I apologize, GDK software here in Holland did a really good webinar, which we repeated during the coding bootcamp, that showed them with a kind of co-pilot type coding experience in there. Right now, the best solution right this moment is to use something like a plugin to do it, because this is still, you know, a technology that's emerging. And I think if you go, oh, we'll do it this way, we'll use this provider, then that's a problem. While things, you know, rise to the surface and a winner or winners emerge. But Carl can speak to what, you know, we may be doing in the future.
Yeah, from a strategy standpoint, I mean, we obviously want to see what is possible. We are not in the business of developing AI models, but there will be some that surface that are better than others. And I think as the trend suggests, these will be less reliant on cloud and moving what you input into someone else's computer. And so from a protection standpoint, I think we are a little bit more cautious of where your code goes. And certainly, you know, when we're talking about enterprise grade security and things like that, AI introduces some issues. And so as AI evolves as a whole into more on device and localized, that opens up a lot more opportunities for us to use it in an assistive fashion to support you in the development you're doing.
And some of them are just not very good as well.
Right.
Some have produced very bad code. I think that, you know, there's a good selection there, and I think, you know, it's going to emerge over the next 6 months. We'll do some webinars about the kind of things that are available, because I do get asked about it, and show the options that are available, and we can compare and see, and maybe we'll help, you know, guide that conversation into what would be the appropriate kind of technology to look at and putting in the IDE when the time comes. But certainly, if you want to have some kind of AI experience in the IDE, go to get it. It's available now. Those plugins are there. We're not saying that you can't have it. We're just saying it's somebody else's code at the moment.
Right. Some questions. Just one thing which is kind of sideways to that. If you're writing code with AIs, as in talking to AIs, usually do that via REST. So you'll make a REST request to an AI server. And we made some nice updates to our REST components in 12.0 that assist you talking to AIs, especially when you have a chat interface and you get back token by token or word by word. So we have excellent support for that kind of thing in 12.0's REST components. Sorry, Kyle, I think you're going to ask another question.
Yeah, just a couple last questions here. 64-bit IDE, where do we sit on that, Marco, David?
Look, it's going to come. Yeah, it's definitely something we want to see soon. Look, I think I can share that we have an internal build that is 64-bit, but it is not something we can ship yet. But it's something that we're working on, and can never promise a timeline or anything like that, because as stated already, we can't do that. But it's something that we want to ship. Exactly what form it'll have, maybe, for example, it'll support only debugging 64-bit apps. It might not support debugging 32-bit or something like that. Those exact questions are still up in the air. Right. It will come at some point. We know it's needed, and yeah, there's lots of interest.
Someone in Germany asked me if we were going to do a version that works on the Commodore 64. I think they were joking, but you never know. Crazy people. Okay.
All right. And then last one, Visual Studio or Visual Assist support for Delphi. I think we answered that, but it did bubble up again. So just to reiterate, that's something that we are, well, Marco, you can take us our position through that if you want. No, Mark, no, David.
Sure. Look, we love Visual Assist, and yeah, we've got a huge amount of interest in it for Delphi, just in this webinar, and also people who might have seen it just before we released. Yeah, look, we don't have anything we can announce, but I think with things like this, we're highly aware of the value. And drop us an email and let us know, but we're aware and we'll definitely look into it.
Yeah, we don't want to announce vaporware as well. You remember the good old days where people would announce things and be 4 years away from delivering them? Well, that's something that is not going to help anybody by saying, oh yes, I'm sure we can have it done soon, and then actually it's not true. There are technical hurdles that people need to leap over, and actually bodies to put actually typing code into the computers and things like that. It's not, you can't just make things happen by magic, and vaporware is not going to help anybody. Truth is what we're looking for.
Yeah, and the more things that are established and we do the testing and we are able to see a viable product, the more transparent we're able to do. I think you saw that in this release as we teased out a little bit earlier than we have normally on some of the things that were coming, and we hope to continue and maintain that strategy going forward. So we want to be truthful and honest, but I think some of that comes with some negative of, hey, it's not happening yet. And so where we can, we will show you what's coming, and where we can't, we will say not yet. But with any of that and with all of that, I'll close this out by just saying lines of communication are open. There's never been a better time to get your voice heard. We are actively looking at what's happened, what's been the key to success in the past, and what will carry us forward. And I think this release is a foundational step in moving us forward. We expect more to come in both dot releases and patches throughout the year and our release cycle. So thank you again for tuning in. Thanks to the participants, both on video and questions. Again, email us with any questions, concerns, thoughts. And if you are not a current license holder, we are currently running some under the radar promos and so forth. Obviously, we expect to, like everyone else, do some Black Friday, Cyber Monday type promos in the future. But if you don't want to wait, feel free to contact me directly. I'll get you into partner or sales rep accordingly. So with that, thank you all for joining.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.